you're whether you're being writing about it, or whether you want to create a song about it, or you want to act it out, or whatever form of art, form of expression that works for you, and you're able to just express what we've been through as a form of release. I think that's joy. I think, that we hold on to so much generational trauma, and we hold on to the narrative from our ancestors, that we forget that, presently in the moment, we're responsible for writing that story, writing that narrative. So I think it's the joy of acknowledging that. And as we address it, switching up the narrative for what we wanted to, say, because at some point we're going to be looked at as the ancestors, right? So what do we want that narrative to be? Right. 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 So what do we want that narrative to be? So we have to talk about it. We have to address it. We got to do something in that. So I think there's joy in knowing that we can change the narrative. If you do, we can change it.
That's a great point. Nico, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. My heart is racing because I feel like joy is super hard for me. And I think it's because I'm like a serious person by nature. And I don't mean that like, clearly I'm not, that serious, but I think the work that I'm engaged in is serious work. And so I wish I didn't think of joy this way, but, I think of it as like this destination that I would love to see alongside my people. And like, there's a sense that, that's like, I don't know where that is or how you get there as a collective, of people. But I think that what I know is important to me is like celebrating the wins when we have them, and finding ways to do that are like free, in terms of expression. And so, I think it's like joy is being in community. It's finding and building a sense of belonging, and then sharing in like all of the stuff together, good and bad.
Absolutely. And how important is it for us to speak our truth right now? Like in this moment, to really speak our truth unfiltered in a sense sometimes, and really just I guess calling things out for like what they are. When we talk about like dismantling white supremacy, like we have to like say that, because these are systems that really have been put against our people. And until we fully engage deep, have a very strong understanding of what we're dealing with, we can't move forward. And I know for me, like speaking the truth in this moment is just more now important than ever. Like before, I kind of felt myself, being honest, I felt myself just like, you could walk the line a little bit, kind of when you get in certain rooms and certain situations, or, you're dealing with certain arts communities, especially like, you wanted to not change your words, but fit in for what the standard was, or what this bar has been put at by certain people, right? But knowing that we are the culture, knowing that we have the power to develop things that are beyond anything they could amount to. So, that's just so honest for me, like speaking my truth and speaking our truth in this moment. Like, and how, for you guys, what is it like now in this moment to make sure you're speaking your truth and genuinely how you feel inside?
You want to go, Nico?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's like an iterative process for me. Like I don't always get it right or exercise those muscles in the right context, right? So I think I'm constantly learning. And right, is subjective, but I mean, I think it's like showing up as my full self to every occasion and my most authentic self. And just seeing how, the context responds to that. Recently, I've been talking a lot about like leading from a place of values and having that be how I step into partnership, collaboration, anything really. It's like, if we're not speaking the same language, if we don't care about the same things and the same people, I'm really not trying to be here with you. And so that feels like a truth that is like unpalatable for some people, right? Which is like, well, maybe we can negotiate on like if racism is real. And I'm like, no, I'm not, that's not what I'm here to do. And so I think it's an honesty that is hard to really exercise in a professional context, but I think personally, like I figured it out. So it's how do you kind of bridge who you are in the comforts of your home and in your family, and then who you are out in the world.
Absolutely.
Right, I agree. I'm just gonna add to that. So it's funny, like I was like after we met the first time, I'm like, okay, let me just think a little bit more about what we discussed. And then I'm like, let me stop myself, right? Because I wanted this the conversation to be what we're talking about, being a truthful conversation. And I feel like sometimes, especially in a professional setting, we do a lot of preparation. And not to say that it's a bad thing to do, but I think when we do a lot of preparation, it takes us away from our authentic self, right? It's
Mhm.
as though we start to tailor, what we're saying, how we're speaking, how we're interacting with certain people, depending on the setting, because we want to present in, in a good light, right? Anyone wants to present in a good light, but I think it's, like you said, Nico, just going in with this sense of value, and that's a sense of value even for yourself, and what you're saying and what you're presenting and bringing to the table is just as good as anyone else, right? So it's like for me, I caught myself starting to like, let me do a little preparation. I was like, no, I'm not gonna do it
Yeah, I didn't
because
either.
I just
I
want
was
to
like,
be
it's like,
right. We
but
just want to be truthful, right? I just
yes,
want to be
absolutely.
honest. So I'm not even gonna prepare. So like that is, I think that's a way to, work on being truthful. Is everything doesn't need necessarily this full-blown preparation for something. Everything doesn't need us to second guess or, reframe what we're thinking or how we're feeling, especially, when it comes to us and, our forward movement as a community.
Absolutely. And sometimes we're afraid of saying the wrong thing.
Yep.
And if we could accidentally or we could offend someone, but how do we find joy in that, right? And for me, it's just being honest, like, hey, I'm not a perfect person. I may not know how to even convey this message to you sometimes. And that's a big thing in our community. Sometimes we're not able to convey our feelings the proper way, and it just comes out a certain type of way, and it may offend someone because of how they were raised or the environment they were raised, and it's not an experience that they have gone through, so they can't kind of relate. So how do you guys like? How would you say, especially Brittany? I think you might have a good answer for this. How could you find joy in like accidentally offending someone? Not even accidentally. Well, I say accidentally. I won't say intentionally, but accidentally offending someone. How could you like find joy, or could that be a teachable moment for both people in a sense, right?
Right. So what's interesting is I feel like someone is always going to be offended. Someone's always going to be offended by anything like you say or do on both sides, right? We hope that, in our interactions and in our conversations with people that, we can connect and, agree. But that's not realistic. So I think, we have to, recognize and just accept the fact that like we're gonna offend somebody, and that's okay. Like it is okay, because that's a part of being, speaking your truth and being in your truth and being your authentic self. Like it is okay. It's okay that you're going to offend someone. I think depending on the conversation, the topic at hand, we have to learn how to navigate those conversations when the offense occurs on both sides, right? So it's like, again, I think there's being ourselves. It's not an intentional, offense. It's not intentional, I'm purposely doing that to you, right? So it's like, again, for me, it's just like, I'm always going to offend someone. Someone's not going to agree with what I have to say. Like, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
Like, as long as, I agree with it and I feel, comfortable with it and I'm okay with saying what I have to say, like, that to me is kind of like joy. That to me is like, because we hold back a lot, and that's just not fair. Like, and that comes out in so many other different ways when you want to hold it in. When I really wanted to say that, it's like, how many times have we had a conversation and later we're like, damn, I wish I said, or
All the time.
like,
Every day.
or
Yeah.
like, I don't think they really got what I was trying to say because you didn't speak up fully. So it's like, we just gotta speak up. And if you're offended, I'm sorry. Like, but not really. Like,
Yeah, and how could we use the arts? I would think, like, how could we use the arts and getting our voice out there, and I guess reconciling a little bit, and like, how do we really use the arts to express who we are in some forms? Because I think a lot of times the art and music, especially, is things that get through to people no matter of their skin tone, because it speaks to your soul. It speaks to the vibration of your body as a human. You know, so how could we use things like that to really get us in a better place? I would say. Either one of you guys, Nico.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like, so the great thing about art is that, you know, if you're a practitioner, I think it like helps align you with your purpose, right? And I think, especially in moments like now where language just seems like, and not that language can't be art, but in particular, I think that language is like really, really failing us. Art allows us to show up in conversations that are like super difficult to have in the ways that we've been taught to have them, right? And so, yeah, I see a lot of connections between like truth telling, art, and joy. And I try and encourage everyone that I'm around to like tap into their inner artist, even if they're a person that like resists that identity, you know, 100%, because no one's ever told them they're creative. Um, and, you know, I was thinking about just back to this question of offending someone, you know, so I was on this panel at Princeton. It was a art and entrepreneurship day. And I was talking about, you know, I was bigging artists up, right? I was like, artists are some of the like most amazing innovators and entrepreneurs I know. And the way that an artist approaches, you know, a blank canvas is similar to the way that entrepreneurs approach a blank piece of paper. And, you know, it was a like majority people of color space. And there was this old white guy that got really upset that, you know, I wasn't like, I don't know, treating entrepreneurship with some like special wand. And, you know, for me, it's like usually every time there's someone like that, like every time I offend someone, there's also someone that I've been brought closer to by speaking that truth, right? And so when I look back on that experience, it's like, yeah, I choose to just remember and value the connections that were made out of being honest about how I feel, you know, about the power of art to like transform people's situation. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like that example kind of answers both questions in one.
Yeah, absolutely. You got anything to add to that, Britt? No?
No, I think, you know, Nico, you said it perfectly. It's like valuing those connections that we made because you speaking that truth. So although you have this one man who didn't like, you know, your analogy and how you're presenting things, you know, the other people in the group definitely, you know, connected with that and probably, you know, allowed them to speak their truth going forward, someone else, and was able to, you know, connect. And I feel like, you know, when we speak our truth, and especially in a group of people and, you know, you know, other people connect to us, that gives them a sense of belonging too, right?
Yeah.
Now, like, oh
Yeah.
shit, you're thinking the same thing I was thinking. This is good. Like, okay, my truth isn't crazy, or my truth isn't like so left field that, you know, no one's gonna understand it. Like, people do understand how I'm feeling. So I think, you know, it's empowering that, you know, we speak our own truth, because then that, you know, empowers other people to speak their truth, and that builds this community, those connections we have, and that's just great.
Right. And especially like in the context of mentorship, right? Like I feel like having young people that for whatever reason look up to me, right? And being honest in my conversations with them about like what the issues are, I feel like somehow that empowers them to, as like the future leaders,
Right.
take that on, right? And not be so self-censored and not be so trained to question their questions of the systems that we've inherited, right? And I think that that feels like a duty and a responsibility to anybody that's like working in a public way, you know, especially in kind of how we build out these relationships, these mentorship relationships.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I definitely want to ask, and I think Nico, this would definitely be perfect for you. Like, how do we? How do we know? Because I was. It's funny. I was looking at your IG yesterday. I was like, yo, she's doing such great things. It's amazing.
Oh,
but
thanks.
how do we rally behind or criticize art forms that we may not essentially agree with? You know, like that, like, well, for I'll split it up, right? So how do we, you know, properly show up for art forms that we do agree with, right? And then for the second half of that, how do we criticize the ones that we necessarily don't without causing division, without, you know, I guess being dismissive in a sense. So if you could speak to it, I would enjoy that. I know that was kind of like a choppy.
No, you're good.
But,
you're good.
You know, we going with the flow. That's what I got.
No, I'm here for it. I'm here for it. I mean, so my short answer is like, I don't know. My long answer is that, you know, so I think of art as like a provocation, right? So because most art doesn't come with like an essay that tells you exactly what it's about and exactly how it's supposed to hit emotionally, spiritually, physically, that's like work that we're doing ourselves as we kind of encounter art, right? And so in my opinion, like any art that asks a question or like is provocative in a way that encourages you to think differently is good art, right? And so,
Absolutely.
you know what I mean? It's like it's hard for me to answer in a universal way, but I think on an individual level, it's like I just don't mess with art that doesn't provoke something in me, right? Like if it doesn't challenge me, if it doesn't encourage me to ask a question or to ask the question of other people, you know, then I'm not really inspired by it. And then showing up, right, is like as makers, you know, I think that it's like we imagine that we're gonna have all this time to like make our own stuff, but then also like big up our friends who are also making great things. But then when you get down to it and you have deadlines and you like look at your calendar, you know, you're like, oh, I didn't go to see a single thing this week, or like I didn't support, you know, a single other person making work. And so I think about this in the context of like I worked in museums for like 10 years, and there'd be times where I'd forget to go downstairs and actually look at art. I'd be so caught up in like, you know, designing a program
Oh,
that I'd be like,
wow.
oh wait, there's art like literally downstairs and the museum is closed to the public. Go see that art, you
Yeah.
know? And so it's like physically showing up for culture that like you might not have any part in creating, right? Just like showing up as a supporter is super important.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
you find yourself when you start experiencing and trying to find different ways. I know for me, I never went to like an art show until about a year and a half ago. And
Yeah.
I just thought it was like some type of boring thing and just people just gonna be bidding. And I went, and just the energy that was in the room and the conversation that I had with other people that was there was just amazing. I never would have thought it. So when I stepped out of that
That's
comfort
great.
zone and went to one, I was just like, oh, that's
You
so dope.
know, you make a good point, because I feel like, you know, a lot of the time we need to experience stuff that we're not used to, right?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to art, because there is so much to be said without even saying anything, right?
Mhm.
So I would agree with you to say, you know, that energy that you experience when you go to an art gallery or to some type of play or to all these other different forms of art where there is not, you know, necessarily words being exchanged, it's different. It feels different. It allows you to be present in the moment, and to kind of just figure out, you know, what those feelings are in your body to connect to it,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
like you said, if it doesn't connect with you, then it doesn't connect with you, right?
Yeah.
We move on to the next one. Like,
Yeah.
Just move on.
figure out, you know, what it is. But it's like, you know, it's different, because you mentioned earlier too, sometimes we struggle to, you know, express our, you know, what we feel and our feelings and how we see things. So it's like this art is another way to do that, right? So experiencing different new forms of it, I think is great. I mean, I've gone to a couple
Yeah.
of days, I've gone to art shows. I'm like, one of the things on my list at some point is for me to just go to an opera show, because that's different. Like
Right.
it may fit with me, it may not. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I want to
That's
know.
one thing
Call
for
me
me.
after you go, because
that was
like,
one
yeah.
that was one major thing for me. You know, I always came up, I started in nightlife, right? And I was really just hip hop, hip hop, hip hop. And then when I started to make the climb into the festival world, that's what opened me up to like indie rock, rock and roll, and all these different genres that just started expanding my mind. And to the point where now I probably listen to a lot more of those type of genres than like hip hop. And it's just crazy. It's just because it was something new to me, and it just like blew me away. I just almost didn't know it exists. It's just
Right.
but
crazy.
it speaks
But
to you,
also,
right? Go ahead, Nico.
yeah. No, I was just gonna say, but I was like, we are constantly evolving creatures, right? And so it's like
Absolutely.
the art that you see changes you. And so then when you go into a new context and you see something different, you experience it differently than you would have, you know, 10 years ago, because you're a new person. And so I think it's like, yeah, just staying in tune with that and kind of reflecting on your instincts, you know, in terms of like what you like and what you don't like is huge, right? Because that changes over time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I do have a question here, and I'm just gonna read it just as I have it written down. And it says, "How do we find healthy balance and celebrating one another in culture?" Um, you know, for me, this is, I guess, not a tough one, but it's kind of a tough one because the competition thing comes into play, in a sense, because by nature, I think, especially Black artists and creatives and curators, we're just competitive by nature. So, you know,
Mm.
we have to still come to some type of point where we're able to, you know, genuinely support and celebrate each other, um, and take the competition out of it, you know what I mean? And just genuinely support each other, because we need each other to sustain. Without each other, we will just fall, you know? So we need each other to sustain in any industry we're in. So for you guys, do you have anything for that?
So
Yeah.
go ahead, Nico.
Oh, no, you go. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, so one thing you said too is like, okay, we're naturally competitive, right? So I think, I agree, we are naturally competitive, but I also on the other side see where, our system, the way the systems are set up to oppress us, puts us in this competitive nature too, right? So we have two of those different things happening at the same time. So I think it's important for us to, have this healthy competition, because most of the time it brings out, other parts of you, better, parts of you that, are shown in whatever form of art or whatever that you're doing. But I feel like we have to be intentional and not forget the big picture of us as a community and as a whole, that, together, when we're all supporting each other, we're better. Together, when we're all supporting together, we're supporting each other, we're stronger, right? There is, with that, we develop this sense of partnership that I think is needed. This, strong sense of where we belong, and we belong to one another, and we're holding each other accountable, and that's what we need. So I think it's twofold. Like, the competition is great, it's there, it's needed, it pushes you to do better work, but we can't forget the big picture that me and you doing the same song, in different ways, like, that's a good thing.
That's
Like,
a great thing.
that's,
Right.
that's a great thing. Like, so, there's a lot of us that are going to be doing similar, same things, but in our own way that is true to us. And that's good. Like, that's a good thing. That's another person we get to connect with. That's another person we get to, that challenges us, but also is like, wow, like, I didn't look at it that way. Or wow, I didn't see it that way. So there's beauty in that too. So I think we have to be intentional about not forgetting the big picture within the competition.
Absolutely.
That's right. I mean, I love everything you just said, and I totally agree. I'd change my whole answer. But what I was thinking before was like, I think it just depends where the competition comes from. Like, if it's coming from an internal place, right, which is like, I want to do better. I want to see myself, in this context. I want to rise. I think that's great, right? And I think that that's just like a thing that we learn to kind of negotiate as individuals. But I actually see us more as like social creatures, like, that want to collaborate, than as competitors, right? And I think that, I talked about this a bit during the pre-call, but it's like, I feel like school trains us to be competitive with each other in a certain kind of way. And so when that competition, the sense of that is coming externally, right? Like, I think about how Black art of all kinds is being consumed right now. That's coming from an external gaze, right? Like, that's coming from people being like, we only have this many opportunities, but we know Black art is hot right now, so we're going to pick the best of the best. Yeah. And like, that's where it becomes a problem, right? Because it's part of those systems that you just shouted out. And so, I think if there's a way for us to remember that, like, we actually need other people, right? Like, most of us are not born able to literally do all parts of a thing. Yeah. Then I think it shifts it into a different place where it's like, I want us to win,
right?
Which I think is like where it's most healthy.
Absolutely. And I wanted to dig into something with that competitive, I guess, force that we have sometimes within our community, since we're here, and how much, like, I guess, our trauma coming up plays into that, as far as continuing the cycle. Because a lot of times I think we're able to identify it around high school. I know I was able to identify, like, I'm very kind of competitive with people for no reason, for no reason. And I didn't really fully be able to act on it until I was in my high 20s, just experiencing through life. And a lot of it, I had to think about this and really dig deep and do some deep healing and shadow work to understand that, some of these traumas that I was facing was just coming from my brother, my older brother. He used to play a game with me called Big Chip, Little Chip. And he would literally give himself 2 chips and give me 1 chip every time. Like, no. And it was a competitive game, but he was getting over on me every single time. So I grew not like a grudge, but I grew a grudge to him once I realized this is what he was really doing. So just like, I just say that to say, like, some of these traumas are deep rooted and they don't even show up. You can't even see them. You don't even know they're there sometimes because you just experienced and you went through it and you lived through it. So, I just wanted to kind of touch on for you ladies, how do you see that showing up when it comes to competitiveness?
Yeah.
Deep one, right? I'm sorry. Sorry.
No. I'm like, I just don't know. I don't feel it. Like I'm not a
Mm.
competitive person by nature. And so I'd be like coming up with a context, but I think I observe it, right? I know it's real. And so, yeah, I mean, I've also almost always worked in like mission specific organizations, like Black and Brown organizations serving Black and Brown communities. And so it just feels like a different context, to kind of understand like how it might show up professionally. But I do see people from outside of that context coming in and like cherry picking, the people that they think are the best at whatever that thing is. And I think, that's where it feels problematic because it is, but I don't feel it like on a spiritual or a personal level as trauma. I feel it as the system doing exactly what the system was designed to do. And so then part of my work becomes like, how do I, as a person leading teams, like empower leadership at all levels of my team so that even when people are out here making these choices, it doesn't affect their sense of self-worth, right? Like they know exactly the value of their labor. And that's like literally all that matters to me. So not a direct answer, but like my ability to kind of find my way into that.
So to add to that, you make a good point in saying, the system is doing what it's designed to do, right? Mm-hmm. So that challenge there is a part of our systems of oppression as well, right? So I think, the best thing that we can do is when you're at a point to be able to acknowledge that, wait a minute, that's not really coming from me. Like, right. Then you need to switch it up and do something about it, right? It's one thing to acknowledge it and then not do anything with it. Like you have to do something with, everything that we're acknowledging that doesn't resonate well with you, that doesn't sit right with you, that doesn't, that is just not okay. So it's like, I feel like we get to a place where we have conversations and then we just stop at the conversation, which isn't enough, right?
Right.
Which isn't enough because then, that continues the cycle, right? Because it's like, oh, damn, you realize like your brother's getting over on you. And it's like, right. We continue to allow that to happen? Or are we going to do something different about
it? Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
So I think it comes down to when we can, acknowledge for ourselves that like, this, generational trauma or this deep rooted trauma that wasn't necessarily specific towards me, but, somewhere intertwined in my family. Like when we can acknowledge that, that's when you have to say, okay, like, I'm not doing that shit no more. Like that don't work for me. Like, I'm not settling for that, or I'm going to speak up about that, or you have to do something different. Because if we don't do anything different, we're going to be stuck in the same space. And then that's not good. That don't feel good. That's draining.
That is draining. Yes, I was about to swear. I mean, very draining. So I hear what y'all are saying as like the power of refusal, and like the importance of that as individual people, like for you to go to your brother, like, nah, give me 2 chips. But then like how that becomes amplified in community, right? So like if all of us were to say, you know what, no, we refuse these like tokenized roles in your institutions, or we refuse to get paid $2 to do a thing that's worth $2 million. Like how we actually begin to shift the habits of the system, right? Like I think that's a thing that feels huge to me, and I don't even know like what to do with that, but it feels like the answer.
Got you. We do have a question. How does one undo rooted problems in power and policies and apply joy? So if someone wants to speak to that, and I'll circle back. I need a quick thought on that because that's kind of, how does one undo rooted problems in power and policies and apply joy?
So that's a big one.
It's big.
That's a big one. And that's not like a small answer, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like that is like continuous effort, like continuous conversation followed by action. Like, and then when we get the action, it's like another conversation to make sure it's really hitting what we need, followed by some more action. Yeah. Like, I think it's continuous cycle because power and policies are so deep rooted that like it's yeah.
I
That's
don't, it's hard to apply joy to that, right? Because it, like you said, it's a continuous thing. It's like, if you're fighting systems of oppression, you're fighting against white supremacy, and you do have some legislation change. Say, then you advocate for some legislation change. Now you have to make sure that legislation is being upheld and it's being held to what you guys were fighting for. So it like the work doesn't stop. The work always continues. It may change the directions, or it may change, I guess, notoriety in a sense, for lack of better terms. But yeah, it always goes that way. And
Yeah.
I
Oh,
would
can I just add?
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh.
Go ahead.
I just want to add real quick. Because it's so huge, I think about it on like an individual level, right? So I think it's like patience, because the work that you're talking about is like really, really slow work that takes generations. And so like, I don't know that any of the people on this call will be alive to see the fruits of the labor that we're putting in today. And I don't mean that as a fatalist. It's just like the truth. And so I think it's patience, but it's also like self and community care, right? So as people committed to working against these systems, which is like super draining work that is like emotionally exhausting, physically exhausting. Yeah, it's like, how do we take care of ourselves so we can like show up every day? Because like you said, it's like work that is continuous, it's like the conversation followed by the action, followed by the conversation, followed by the action. And so,
Stop.
Yeah, it's like take a nap, like, I don't know. It just feels like self-preservation tactics,
Right. The point that I was going to add is even though it's continuous work and it doesn't stop, I think it's important for us to celebrate the milestones that we have on that journey, right? Because if we are able to celebrate those milestones that we have on the journey, it keeps us motivated. It keeps us going and kind of gives us this, little bit of like a reset, right? Versus like just feeling drained throughout the whole process is like, don't forget to celebrate the small moments because those are huge. Because if we weren't having these conversations and following it with action, we wouldn't be seeing any of this. So I think, we have to remember to celebrate those, stepping stones because they're big, they're a part of it. And I think that'll continue us to motivate us to continue to do the work. That's never going to end at this point.
Right.
That gets us closer to reconciliation. Like that gets us closer to I guess when we're having friendly energy amongst each other. So that's definitely important. One thing I will ask, economically, how could one benefit the community to be more united? So I guess economically, how would it look? I will frame the question like this: economically, how could it look? How do you guys see? How do you ladies, women, see the arts community looking if we were united, if we were really just strongly just supporting each other? Like, what could that show up like? What would that look like? If you could just give people a vision, and myself, I have my thoughts, but I would love to hear yours.
Yeah, I think it exists in pockets already. Look, I think it exists inside like forest bias institutions and the communities that those institutions support. I feel like it's like relying less on other people's money, right? So I think it's like if we can get rid of philanthropy and like the need for people to give us money to actualize our dreams, I think we're in a different space. And so, but I'm just thinking economically, right? It's like, and my husband and I talk about this all the time, but it's like worker-owned cooperatives, right? Where it's like we're all putting in the work, but we're all reaping the benefits of this work together because we're doing this in community. We're doing this with a sense of our value and purpose in mind, and we're not waiting for permission, from someone else in order for us to like do that work. And so, yeah, it feels utopic, but it feels like something we could actually achieve on Earth if we just like speak to each other more.
So I'm definitely agreeing with that. It's us, I love the fact that you said not waiting for permission and not waiting for, someone to give us this money to do this. Like we can figure this shit out. Like we can figure it out. We can figure it out if we collectively did it together, right?
Right.
Collectively did it together. If we're celebrating each other, if we're, like you said, Nico, earlier, accepting the fact that we can't do everything on our own. Like there's a bigger picture, and within your bigger picture there are multiple people, Black and brown people, that are just like us, that probably have the same goal too in some sense. So why not let's do it together, so that we can all reap the benefits of it, you know?
Right.
So it's like the other part when I just think about economically too is like, you know, it's cliche to say it, but like buy Black, buy brown, do your research. Don't just, you know,
Right.
buy whatever's there because it's cheaper or convenient or because that's what you're used to, right? Put the money into supporting each other and supporting ourselves, and you know we can do better, you know, economically. We can, doing that would allow us, instead of looking for, you know, this person for the money, we have it in our own community, because
Yeah,
we're putting back into each other, right?
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
Collectively pulling, right? So you know we got to just do things the right way, in a sense, be more intentional to support us. um
Absolutely. And that brings me honestly to the next question that we have right here, which is what work do you do to step outside of identity politics, or rather abolish them? Um for for me, when it comes to, I guess, politics and art, um to try and keep it like on the arts conversation, like it's about not even abolishing them, but it's going around them. Because what I learned is, and you know, for me, I learned that there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? So like we could fight against certain type of art, or we could, you know, we could advocate against certain type of art and stuff like that, or that we may not like, or we could just find the spaces where we could celebrate the art that we do like. You know, so for me, it's just really just trying to go around the system. Like the system is there and it's very oppressive, and it's like they've been doing it for a long time. It's hard to navigate through and find a way to break it down, to get in enough to tear the building down. So for me, I'm just like, I'm gonna just go down the street, around the block, and come there, you know? So that's just how I look. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that, but that's just me.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying. You know, so I think we have two different kind of lanes. We have a, you know, a lane where we're doing the work to, you know, break down these oppressive, you know, systems, and that's a tireless work, but it's work that is needed. But at the other point of it too, like, you know, I believe it was like Tyler Perry, like, you know, let's build our own table. Let's build our own, like, you know, we can be doing that on the other side of it too, building our own, going around it, like, you know, creating the systems that, you know, work for us. Like, so we have both sides of it.
Absolutely. Nico, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say, like, I'm not at all interested in stepping outside of identity politics. It's like the nexus of my work and where it all comes together. Like, I think it's important and it's complicated and it's supercharged as a space. And yeah, it's one of those things where it's like you got to lean into it to like imagine being on the other side of it. And again, I think that's slow work. So I'm like, I'm here for it, you know, like I
So
enjoy.
we appreciate you being here for that, okay? Because
Yeah, yeah.
it's a long journey. So
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so funny. I just think about it. You know, we get angry and we get frustrated and we're filled with rage sometimes, like dealing with fighting these type of systems. And you know, it's just part of the journey. It's like just something we have to go through. You know, it's something we our ancestors really experienced, you know. And oftentimes it's funny, my nephew would say you know, that our experiences are like way worse than our ancestors. And I'm like, well, how could you even measure that? Like, you know,
Yeah.
how could you really measure what was happening in 1919? Or like how can you really measure that? You know, it's interesting. So one thing I do want to ask, what kind of like the whole conversation we had and everything we talked about, really I just wanted to tap into like what are some solutions we could do to kind of get to these better places we're shooting for, to this place of unity, this place of you know, Black culture and art showing up properly in these spaces. Could is Do we need a reset period, or is it too late? You know, I honestly, my personal opinion on arts and entertainment as a whole, not just within the state of Connecticut, but as a nation, it's a reset. Now's the time for a reset, you know. And I say this as, you know, I do the festival. So what I notice as a trend now, and this is why I consider it a reset, is because all of the major festivals, they're too big. Like they're too big. They're so big now that they can't even operate because you only can have 150 people or 200 people outside because of COVID guidelines. So now some of the smaller festivals and, you know, farmers markets and black arts and harvest festivals, they're able to operate. A lot of them are able to operate because they were smaller. They were always in that 150, 200 people mark. So it's just interesting that some of the bigger platforms really don't have the ability to put on these showcases of art that they would normally do. But the ones that were on the grassroots at the bottom have the perfect time now. So it's just interesting how that shifted. But I just wanted to know, do you guys think we need a reset or is it too late? I think we're here. I think the reset's now, honestly. It's my opinion.
Nico, you are in this work. I want to hear you. What's your thoughts?
I just don't know what there would be to reset, you know, like there's just so many facts that sit around us all the time, like of which racism is one, right? And so for me, it's like just dealing with what we have and like trying to find new ways to put like all these pieces back on the board that serve us. And so, you know, I think COVID has like taught me a lot on a personal level in terms of the value and use of institutions, if at all. I'm critical of them more now than ever. And so, yeah, it's like in the language of COVID, like what is essential to our thriving and to our success and what is not, you know, like what can we let go of? Yeah, and then I think, you know, there's like the systems that we just have to chip away at over time. You know, like I've been saying, that's probably the theme of the call is like, yeah, like where are we just going to make small dents, you know, every single day and that hope one day we wake up and the thing is gone. But I just don't know. There's no pre-COVID that I want to return to. There's no pre anything else that I want to return to. So reset isn't it for me because it's like I don't know what we're going back to in a country that is this country. Yeah, and similar to like reconciliation, right? Like it's like I don't have any desire to reconcile with anyone in particular, and so it's like who are the allies in the work that show up on the day the work is happening, because we're all trying to move forward.
Right. So, and we had started having this conversation the other day in terms of, you know, allyship and, you know, who's showing up to do the work and, you know, things of that nature. And I agree with you, you know, the way that you presented it in terms of, you know, the reset. Like I agree with you. I don't want to go back to pre-COVID either. Like I don't, because I feel like during COVID we've had a lot of, you know, changes, a lot of forward movement, a lot of shifts, you know, individually and then, you know, as a community. So I want that to continue to, you know, move forward. So, you know, the reconciliation is definitely a hard one, right? It's definitely a hard one because we have to put in the work needed to continue to change the environment, the society that we're in. In terms of allyship, you know, I'm on the same page with you as like these allies are the people who are, you know, who are showing up and you continuously show up and you're here, you know, to do the work in this tireless fight that we're on. You're in the tireless fight 100% of the time, probably 150% of the time.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know? I was like double time.
right. Like doing way more than probably we're even doing in a sense, you know? So it's a tough one. Like, you know, I'm on the same page. You mentioned it earlier. I don't know if we're going to be the generation to see our fruits of our labor, but I hope, you know, there are fruits to our labor right now. Like, I hope that, you know, at some point there is, you know, a potential for, you know, a better society, right? A better society, a better place for us to be, you know, authentically ourselves, and to feel empowered and to feel valued just like, you know, anybody else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's I feel like it's just a spirit that's now like, you know, amongst melanated beings, honestly, it's just a spirit of, you know, I guess being unapologetically radical. Like, you know, like literally, it's just it's a spirit that's just there, and it's hard to explain sometimes. You know, but yeah, this has been great. I think we covered so much. Is there any topics that we kind of didn't cover today that we maybe spoke about the other day that you guys want to bring up? I think we got about 13 more minutes. So, and if anyone has any questions, please drop them, and we'll definitely try and get to them. So either Britt or Nico, if you guys have anything you want to add. Ladies, I keep saying guys, I'm so sorry. I'm like trained. I gotta untrain
I do it
myself.
too.
I
I
gotta
know.
unlearn and relearn everything about my life. Go ahead.
No, you're good.
So one of the things that we kind of talked about the other day that I'm just going to touch on quickly is that, you know, rage being a part of our journey towards joy, right? You know, this the feeling of being, you know, mad, angry, pissed off, enraged about everything that we're experiencing as a melanated people, right? That is needed to get to this place of joy. And the joy is going to look like, you know, it's going to be different from everyone, right? It's going to be different for everyone. I think joy is that sense of relief, that sense of, you know, I can finally like just be myself, and I'm good with that, and I'm comfortable with that. But before we get there, we go through this period of anger. And I think people need to know that that's okay. That is completely okay. That is part of the process. You know, most of the time, and, you know, history shows when we're pissed off, changes happen, right? You know, that's when we're really in our truth. So that we can't dismiss that. And we may be in a period of rage for a while. We may be.
Yeah.
I'm optimistic to think that, you know, when that period ends, it's going to feel so much better. So this spirit that you are feeling right now is going to be amplified, you know, as we go through this journey, right? So that is one thing that I definitely wanted to mention, that it is okay for us to, you know, be angry right now. We need that. That means you're feeling something. You're feeling something, you know, it's not right, you know, it's not resonating with you. That's the start of it, right? And then we have to take it from there.
That's right. I think the only, not the only other thing, because there's a lot of other things, but another thing from our conversation earlier this week, you know, was that like, this is collective work, but it's also super individualized work, right? And that it shows up differently in everybody. And I think it came up because I was like resisting the title of activist because of how I show up and where I show up. You know, I think of myself more as an advocate who like in no way wants to co-opt the work of people who do show up every day in a very like tactile way. And yeah, I think because art is so subjective and it's such an expansive idea, I think it's important to talk about that a little bit, right? That it's like, no matter who you are and how you kind of show up to the idea of dismantling these oppressive systems, like that is needed work, that's necessary work, and it fits into this kind of spectrum of activity that we're all a part of. And yeah, I just wanted to name that because I think, you know, I don't know everyone that's in the room with us, but I imagine you're here for a reason and that you're all doing really important work and that that's part of this kind of, you know, matrix that we're talking about.
Yeah,
no, absolutely. So much work that we have to do, so much. I think, you know what, I will say this. One thing that I guess through the pandemic that when everyone had to stop and take a pause, I think that was like one of the greatest moments that, you know, we weren't able to accept because of so much confusion, so much death, so much trauma that was surrounded around everything. But that was one time in our history where we really just paused, like, because even if you wanted to go to work, you couldn't go to work. Like, you know, you could be like, I want to go to work. And it was just, no, you have to sit still. You have to just accept everything. You have to take everything that's going on. So it was interesting. We do have a question. Karina asks, as a Black woman, how does one address questions from search panelists at these educational institutions? That's a good question. I don't know if I have an answer for that. I don't know if one of you may be able to tap in.
Yeah, I mean, so I think in general, when like anyone asks me to show up somewhere, I ask them why me. I didn't used to, you know, like I used to be like, of course, it pays $25. I'll be there in 5 minutes, you know.
I'm gonna use that's a great one. Why me? Like why
me?
Yeah.
No, because it's like, have you done the work of like understanding me enough to know or think or believe that I'm going to add something to this context that you're creating. And if you can't answer why me, then I'm showing up as a token or as a stand-in for all Black people. And
Mm.
that's just like work that I now refuse. And so, yeah, I think, Karina, to your question, I think a lot of it is showing up now in these kind of rushed responses to Black Lives Matter 2020, to COVID-19, of all these institutions like trying to hire Black and brown people in so-called positions of power that have like just been come out of thin air, right? It's like, okay, so like, is this a fully funded position long term? Like, is there infrastructure to
Yeah.
support this Black person in making your institution more diverse, more equitable, more inclusive? If not, then like, what is the motivation? Like, why are you doing this? And is this work actually part of the lineage of work that we're doing that should be sustainable? And so, yeah, I think as a Black woman, it's like there's plenty of levels on which I can be tokenized, right? It's not just that I'm Black, it's that I'm a
Right.
woman, you know,
Yeah.
I'm also a queer person. And so, yeah, I think that is tough. And I think I try not to just have a blanket answer that's like, hell no, because I do learn a lot in the negotiation and in the question asking back to the institution. But yeah, that's like, that could be a whole other panel.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, I gotta prepare for that.
Yeah, I'm like, that's like a whole other thing.
So I definitely love your response, and I'm definitely going to use that more because we have to ask that. I feel that I do it, but not enough in terms of, the why. Like, convince me to be on your panel. Tell me why.
Right.
You know, like, because again, if we go back to what we talked about in terms of our value, I know I'm valuable to your panel. Like, I know that. I know that I could bring a lot to the table. Do you actually know that? Right.
Right.
And then, you speak, like we said, that can be a whole nother panel in terms of these rushed responses in terms of like, we hire someone that is, a melanated person. Are you going to actually allow them to speak and make changes in the company and do their work? Are you going to actually allow them to do their job? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Versus this is just your face right now, so that it
Right.
looks like you're an ally and that you're good. Right. So I think it's on part of, our job too, as, these people are arising and, I hate to use people, but, are arising as, wanting to be allies to us to, ask that question. Why us? Why me?
Yeah. Yeah.
More details. Like how is
Right.
this like let's just talk about, like, you just shout out, I'm the director of diversity inclusion. What does that mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean? And what do you actually want me to do? And are you actually okay with me, doing that? Right? Doing
Right.
that and representing that. Because if not, then we need to be refusing that work too. Right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we have a question I want to get to it. I think this is a good one. Before we kind of wrap up, what words can you offer to Black, Indigenous, people of color, BIPOC? I wanted to make sure I said that out, so I'll repeat it again. What words can you offer to Black, Indigenous, people of color, specifically teens, regarding to how they can continue to find joy artistically and encourage them because they are feeling down in our adult-driven world?
Who asked
Yeah.
that? I love you.
It was an
Whoever you
anonymous
are.
attendee.
I love you, anonymous attendee.
Yeah, Nico, you want to add to that?
That's tough. I mean, so here's what I wish someone told me when I was a young BIPOC person trying to figure out who I was, which is, yeah, like invite art to help you kind of find your voice and to explore who you are and who you want to become. I think that we're trained really young that like art's not going to make you money. How are you going to survive? And so it gets put into this hobbyist place, or this place where, it's like, do it if you find time, or do it instead of, playing sports. And it's not that, right? Like, I think art is an essential language that we all have access to, that we can choose to use in whatever way serves us. And so, yeah, young people out there, it's like, have it help you find yourself.
Yeah.
I mean,
go ahead.
I was going to say, to add to that, I think, when you do something you're passionate about, and if you're what you are passionate about is expressed through art, it'll pay your bills. it'll get there. Like, you know, so
Yeah.
it's like, you know, be you, like, just like Nico's saying, be you, do that work, be, you know, express yourself whatever way you need to express yourself, because that goes back to what we talked about in terms of being truthful to you and standing in your truth, right? And, you know, most people who stand in their truth too, you'll be better off. It'll come. It'll,
Yeah.
because you don't want to be one of these people that are at their job and dread going to their job, but they're just there because it's a check. Like, that's a miserable life to live. Like, that's not
No, absolutely.
what you want to do. You don't want to add that on top of, you know, all the other things we have going on against us. So, you know, explore that art, express it, take it to the extremes, do it.
Right.
And especially
Get weird.
And I was
Yes.
gonna say, especially for, you know, for the youth specifically, now in this moment with technology, everything is advancing, right? So there's digital art that's now being sold using cryptocurrency, like, you know,
Yeah.
so, and just imagine if, you know, I'll just kind of put it in the context. If your favorite rapper, your favorite artist could draw a 101, and, you know, you could get that digital footprint of that content, and you own that, and, you know, over time, you owning that digital piece of art is just growing in value, you know, and working it off of something like the crypto market is just like, go ahead.
I was just adding, you just need one. Be yourself, you know, be, you know, unapologetic with it. Take it to the heights that, you know, resonate with you. And you just need one person to see it and to, you know, connect with it.
That's it.
That's it. And then from there, it'll continue to grow. But even just that feels great, right? That will keep that fire inside of you just burning, right? Because you're just being true to yourself. So to our teens, go for it. Go for it. Don't wait for permission. Do it. Do what you need to do, because them doing that is a part of the work we're all doing collectively too, right? That'll continue to change, you know, as the years goes on too. So go for it.
Absolutely. And adults in the arts industry support the ones coming underneath them, you know, give them the information, give them the tools, help them find the resources. These are all important things. You know, these are all very, very important things. We're at 12:14. I think we're done at 12:15, right?
Yeah.
I hope everyone has been enjoying this conversation. We thank you all for joining us. It's been healthy. It's been refreshing. It's been healing. It's been this conversation has been great, and I want to thank New Haven Cultural. They are doing amazing things in New Haven. Shout out to Adrian Jefferson, Tiffany, and Rita, the whole team. I'm sorry, Kim. Like, there's so many people doing great things. We appreciate you all. Me being from Waterbury, I love to see what's going on in New Haven, because I'm trying to reciprocate that and replicate that energy that's going on in New Haven within my city. So I appreciate it.
Yes,
Let's
definitely.
get it.
Great panel. I'm happy to be here. This was great conversation. Like, energy is amazing here. So this is great.
Yeah, thank you all. This has been fun.
Yeah.
All right.
Why me?
See ya.
Why me?
Guys, don't forget to tune into the other panelists we have, you know, later on today. Don't forget to tune into those.
Yep. Unapologetically radical.
Yes.
.com, and you can find the links for all the rest of the day. Thank you.
Right, so guys, we're gonna end this webinar, but you guys can head back over to the website for the live stream. The game show is gonna start at 12:30.